Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us once more for our ongoing virtual learning series, The State of Pregnant and Parenting Students in California. My name is Miguel Leon, Senior Program Manager with the Michelson 20mm Foundation. I use pronouns he, him, his, and I'm coming to you from Tongva ancestral lands. I'm a Latinx male with black hair combed to the side, brown eyes, black rimmed glasses, and I'm wearing a navy blue button-up shirt. Before we get started, I'd like to share a bit about our foundation. Founded by Dr. Gary K. Michelson and Alia Michelson, the Michelson 20mm Foundation is dedicated to ensuring that everyone, particularly our most vulnerable populations, has access to the equitable post-secondary educational opportunities that lead to meaningful careers. We proudly operate at the cutting edge of higher education to help forward-thinking innovators, nonprofits, and startups close the opportunity gap. Today, we are excited to welcome student parents that we've had the privilege of meeting over the course of this project. We thank them for their willingness to share their experience and their guidance as we continue to build this very important work. One of our goals as a foundation is to center community as the source of solutions to the issues that we care about the most. But beyond listening, we'd like to step aside and let student parents themselves guide today's conversation. Before we get started, if you'll indulge us, our co-chair, Alia Michelson, had prepared some remarks and she couldn't be here with us. So I'll be reading those remarks for her. So from Alia Michelson, our co-chair. Thank you so much for joining us once again for our virtual learning series, The State of Pregnant and Parenting Students in California. We are grateful for your ongoing participation and honored that you have taken the time to join us for this important conversation. Throughout this series, we've tried to center the conversation around the needs of student parents and surface solutions to best support them in their post-secondary academic endeavors. Along the way, we've had the privilege of meeting countless student parents whose resilience continues to inspire us as we push for increased investment, systems change, and policy change that will help them succeed. Today, we're honored to open the virtual stage to student parents whose willingness to selflessly share their story will highlight what we can all do to move the needle on student parent supports in our state. We're excited to host this session as a platform through which they remind decision makers at all levels what can be done to help student parents forge a brighter future for themselves and their families. To the student parents on our panel and to those in our audience, we see you, we hear you, and we thank you. Thank you also to our co-hosts and partners, Ascend at the Aspen Institute, Blue Shield of California Foundation, California Competes, Tipping Point Community, and the Education Trust West for making today's session possible. We hope that you enjoyed today's event and see this conversation as a starting point for much needed work in support of student parents. Thank you so much for indulging us. That was a message from our co-chair, Alia Michelson. Now I'd like to introduce you to our presenter today, Theresa Anderson, who is Principal Research Associate at the Urban Institute. Theresa is passionate about using research to inform action that helps adults, children, and families to meet their education and life goals. Before we kick off our panel, Theresa will share some recent research findings on student parents in post-secondary education. Theresa, welcome to our virtual stage.
Thank you so much, Miguel, and thanks to everyone for inviting me to be part of this today. So as Miguel mentioned, I'm a researcher at the Urban Institute, but I actually completed this research for my PhD at George Washington University. I finished in 2020, almost exactly a year after I became a student parent myself. But this research actually began before my son was born because of my interest in helping families meet their goals. So especially thinking about supports for both generations simultaneously, like the 2-gen approach. And I also heard a lot of stories doing projects in community college and training programs at the Urban Institute from students who were really motivated to go back to school and succeed because of their children. And this was really rarely acknowledged in any formal way in their programs. I've also had a long interest about engagement in children's schooling, family engagement opportunities. So this brings together a lot of passions and interests, and it's become more personally salient to me over time. I'm continuing my focus on student, parent, and family issues in my work at Urban, and we're actually on the brink of launching a field-wide collaborative called SPARK, Student Parent Action Through Research Knowledge. So I'm glad to talk with folks more about that if you're interested. So you may already know the statistic that more than 1 in 5 undergraduate college students are parents, but actually more than 1 in 4 or 28% of female undergraduate college students are parents. And that adds up to about 2.6 million undergraduate student mothers in 2016. Also, might be interesting to know that more than a third of all women with children enroll in school at some point with minor children. And if we look at Black female undergraduates, 40% were mothers in 2016, and more than half of all Black mothers in the United States enroll in school at some point after having kids. So promoting student parent success is also about promoting the success of students of color, and there's a lot of intersectional issues as we're talking about parenting students. The other thing is that not all parenting students are single moms. So more than a third of undergrad student mothers were married in 2016. I think that's important because there's a perception of like who we're talking about when we're talking about student moms, and it's a range of family situations. So we also know from other work and from talking with many parenting students that student parents are really motivated to succeed so they can set a good example for their children and better support their families, and also that they earn equal or even higher grades than other students. But that said, they're more likely to have low incomes and work while in school, to be enrolled part-time, and to not complete a degree, especially if they are unmarried. Student parents have to navigate systems and balance school, children, often employment, and other life responsibilities all at the same time. And while doing all of that, they rarely receive appropriate advising, may struggle to afford tuition and costs considering their other financial obligations, and often lack social supports while in school. And I know the panelists will be talking a lot about these things in today's session. Student parents also struggle with basic needs and security. So these data are from the 2019 Hope Center survey. You'll see that about over half of student parents at that point of that survey were experiencing food insecurity relative to about a third of other students. Over 2/3 were experiencing housing insecurity relative to less than half of other students, and about 17% were experiencing homelessness, which was similar to other students. These rates were even higher during the pandemic, and they're generally higher for students at 2-year colleges than 4-year colleges. So something I want to keep coming back to is that whenever we're talking about student parents, we're talking about families with children. And my work here is trying to dig into the whole family experiences and effects of parents being in school. So just quickly about the study. So this study explores how families fare in the long run when women with children and re-enroll in school at any level after at least a 2-year gap in their education. So I used data from a national survey that tracked families from 1979 to 2014 for women and children. And the reason I focus on student mothers is not only because 70% of student parents are mothers, but also because the survey only links women with their biological children. So that was a constraint of the data. But I also interviewed 20 women who were in 2-year college, 4-year college, and graduate school programs. And really what I wanted to do was understand the effects of going back to school on academic, economic, and social well-being for each generation and for the family as a whole. So just a few extra considerations before I get into the findings results. The survey covered a specific group. So it was women who were in the United States in 1979 and who were born from 1957 to 1964 and their biological children. These women largely went back to school in the late 1980s and early 1990s. So the findings don't reflect some recent changes, including more recent immigrant groups and changes in college costs and labor market in the last few decades. And the interviews were at a specific time and place as well. So I conducted these in fall of 2018 in the national capital area. It's not a random sample, not meant to be representative of a larger group, so I don't want to generalize too broadly, but there were a lot of consistent themes and recommendations in these women's experiences, which are important and have been echoed in other places and populations. Okay, so here's what I found. So this graph shows the growth in educational attainment for mothers who re-enrolled in school relative to very similar mothers who did not re-enroll. And I'm tracking women for 20 years after they first went to school. So that's what the numbers on the bottom of this graph show, is the number of years since return to school from 0 to 20. And the green line is showing high school diploma completion. The blue line shows college degrees. The red line shows four-year degrees, which is a subset of college degrees. And the pink line shows graduate degrees. And the main takeaway here is just that mothers who went back to school didn't get their credentials and degrees right away. In fact, some women were still getting their degrees 10, 15, 20 years after they first went back. It's not a one and done experience. And you know, as I don't think that's a surprise to anybody on this webinar, but I think it's important to drive that home. And that said, and by the end of this, only about 1/3 of mothers who went back got to the next highest credential eventually. And only a quarter of those who didn't have a college degree completed one, either a 2-year or a 4-year degree. So I'm going to be showing findings here for mothers overall, mothers and their children's overall. So meaning if they enrolled at all, regardless of completion, and also for mothers and their children where the mothers did ultimately complete a college degree and they didn't have one before. So let's talk about the mothers first. So going back to school resulted in earnings gains for women overall of about $2,000 a year. And the gains were over 3 times higher on average if they completed a college degree. But there were what we call opportunity costs. So that is that earnings were lower for a while when they were pursuing education. They had lower earnings for about 5 years, and the gains were not consistent and statistically significantly positive until 9 years after going back to school. This is a while to go with lower income. The opportunity costs of education were not accidental. So women shared in interviews that they made explicit decisions to decrease their work effort and earnings to accommodate their schooling and to try to retain some time with their children. And they recognize that those income losses were part of the cost of education, but they believe that the financial trade-off would pay off in the long run. So something that's interesting is that even though earnings were higher, household income actually declined for the overall group, though not for those who completed a college degree. And the reason for that is that it relates to an interesting pattern around marriage. So across both groups, women who went back to school were less likely to be married. And this was consistent finding over time. So they were less likely to be 2 earners in their household. So that affects household income. And there's 3 different reasons, possible explanations for that pattern, each of which had some support in the qualitative research. It may be that some women returned to school during or following a separation or divorce. I heard that quite a bit. Also, school reentry may have put pressure on some relationships that caused them to not succeed. And also women who were not married at school re-enrollment were maybe less likely to subsequently marry. So in the interviews I did, some of the women explained that they decided to return to school shortly after their marriage or relationship ended. And others said that the stress and pressure of their schooling put new demands on continued partnerships. Also, some women said that they developed new self-identities through their education that clashed with their husband's ideas about family roles. And so those dynamics show the causality is muddled. So it wouldn't be accurate to say that going back to school caused marriage to decline, but there's an association. And finally, mothers overall had higher depression scores at age 50, though we don't see that among mothers who completed a college degree. So there may be some mental health supports that would help in the longer term. So let's talk about the children too. I think this is another dimension of student-parent experience that's really important. So in the short term, children gained on their verbal and reading test scores when their mothers re-enrolled in school. And those gains were larger and lasted longer for children whose mothers completed college degrees. But they also had worse behavior indicators. So in the overall group, this was a standardized behavior problem index, which was worse for children whose mothers went back to school for 5 years. And then among children whose mothers completed a degree, their behavior scores were not actually worse, but they were more likely to be suspended at some point while in school. So the way I've interpreted this is that there's some transition costs of mothers' educational enrollment for children. And while we see benefits, and I'll talk more about it, it's important to be thinking about the experience and the supports for families and for children as parents are pursuing schooling. One when some of the interviews, the women talked about that they were concerned about the quality and quantity of time they could spend with their children while they were in school. And also that their children may have had more unsupervised time or been in kind of lower quality care environments while their mothers were in school. Also, children may have perceived that they were not their mother's top priority as they tried to struggle to kind of make multiple ends meet, and that may have resulted in some behavioral issues. So that said, in the longer term, children of mothers who went back to school saw higher educational attainment themselves. So there was a growth in high school completion of about 2%. They were 10% more likely to enroll in college and 16% more likely to get a college degree. And then if their mother completed a college degree, the rates were even higher. For example, they were almost 40% more likely to get a college degree themselves. So there were big payoffs in their education. And then I looked at earnings for children after age 25. They were, in this analysis, they were about age 28 on average, but some of the children were as old as 40. And so this is kind of early mid-career. But basically, we didn't see earnings gains in early adulthood for the overall group, but among those whose mothers completed degrees, we saw increases in earnings of about $4,000 per year after age 25. So that's really promising for them. We also, though we saw these effects on marriage among the mothers, we didn't see any effect on marriage for children. And finally, one thing to flag is that we did see some negative effects on children's physical health in the overall group in terms of their likelihood of having a serious physical health limitation, but we didn't see any worse health indicators for the group of kids of moms who completed school or completed their college degree, and we didn't see any mental health long-term effects. So just kind of summarizing what I just said, basically, mothers who re-enroll gain more education, they work more, and they earn more on average, but they are less likely to be married, and family income declines on average. There are some long-term negative mental health effects potentially for the mothers. And then children of mothers who re-enroll do better academically in the short and long term on average. This only translates to earnings gains for children of mothers who completed college degrees, at least in their kind of early career. And they also experience some more behavioral problems. So kind of the sum here is that enrollment is hard on families, but mothers think it's worthwhile to meet their employment and personal goals and to set a good example for their children, but they could use more supports. So I'm just going to briefly, I know that I can't go into all of this in all the detail, but I just wanted to share a few recommendations that came from the interviewees. These were the most common ones for interventions that would help them succeed. So topping the list is on-campus babysitting or childcare, followed by faculty and staff sensitivity training, and a resource center or support group for student parents or student mothers more specifically. These are kind of the numbers of people who mentioned each of these supports as being useful. And I took the insights from the interviews and also looked across the field at some of the recommendations and developed these kind of a set of suggestions on how to improve experiences for student mothers while they're enrolled. So this wasn't developed before the pandemic, but I think the themes persist now, even if the details may slightly differ. So I identified 5 areas that would make a big difference for parents. So summarized in these slides. So the first is a safe and welcoming campus culture, which may involve adopting the family-friendly campus toolkit from PIRG Learning, adapting what's called the 8 keys to veteran success, which could very easily be adapted for parenting student population, making kind of a point person for reasonable accommodations, the way that that kind of position already exists for students with disabilities and for veterans, and at some schools even for athletes. Having someone who can help support pregnant and parenting students would be very helpful. And finally, being able to understand the student parent population, collecting data so that we can actually know who needs supports and what the upshot is for student parent kind of academic progress. And then another area that would help students is strengthening advising supports. So that might involve kind of enhancing college advising and taking a holistic approach, and also thinking about advising that is student parent specific. And that might also include trying to help direct students to programs that are going to likely have both like work with their lives logistically while they're studying and also have high probability of completion and kind of payoff in terms of their satisfaction and their employment outcomes afterward. Another big area is childcare. So more subsidies and providers is the biggest thing. Childcare is really complicated right now, but having more opportunities for extended weekend and non-traditional hours, expanding on-campus childcare, having the Child Care Development Fund cover education support activities, which is a flexibility allowed by the federal government, but not all states use it. And then accounting for the cost of care and financial aid calculations, which is not done automatically and usually requires an appeal to do. And then that kind of goes into financial support. So thinking about changes to financial aid and the Pell Grant program that are more nuanced than I have time to explain right now, but would certainly help support parenting students. Having more consistency about how workforce funds and supports are implemented across states. Creating more refundable tax benefits for low-wage workers, and improving access to SNAP, TANF, Medicaid, and housing for parenting students, which sometimes face additional barriers to these programs. And the final wheel here is what we call social support. So this includes paid leave, including for students, thinking about better Title IX guidance on parenting students, which just came out today. Happy 50th Title IX anniversary. There actually was a new set of regulations just released a few hours ago. So y'all should look at those. Possibly also marriage and parenting support for students, as we saw, relationships are sometimes challenged during this time. And finally, involving childcare centers in schools and thinking about two-generation models that can also be supportive in the places where kids are getting their education. So with that, I will pass it back to Miguel. I just want to say thank you. I have a, please feel free to reach out to me. I also have a brief that summarizes this in more detail or provides more detail about it. And I just really appreciate the opportunity to share this with you all today.
Thank you so much, Theresa, for sharing that very important information. We'll make sure to share links to your findings with our audience. So folks in our audience, keep an eye out for that. It is now my privilege to introduce you to our moderator for today's discussion, Amber Angel. Amber serves as program officer for Ecmc Foundation, where she oversees the Single Mother Student Success Portfolio. Prior to Ecmc, Amber served as program manager at the LA Valley College Family Resource Center, and as a student parent herself, as a student parent advisor for Ascend at the Aspen Institute. She continues to teach at LA Valley College and has over 9 years of experience working in higher education and managing public and private grants. Amber's story of overcoming higher education obstacles as a student parent herself was featured on PBS NewsHour Weekend. She is a passionate advocate for higher education support initiatives for all underserved students and holds a Bachelor of Science in Family Studies from California State University, Northridge. Welcome, Amber. We're happy to have you with us today. Congrats on your new role at Ecmc. Take the mic. It's all yours.
Thank you. That was weird hearing all of those things about me. I'm super happy to be here. I'm super grateful to be here. I relate to so many of the findings and the experiences in which you, Theresa, found in your studies. And I'm very grateful to be here with my panel. I'm very excited to uplift their stories because as we, move into this work, it's very important to be mindful of the fact that parents are the experts in their own lives, and it's important to have their voices heard and not to have a conversation about them without them. So Miguel did mention that I just transitioned to Ecmc Foundation. And for those of you who are not familiar with us, we are a nationally focused post-secondary funder based in LA, committed to improving post-secondary persistence and completion for students that come from underserved backgrounds. I personally oversee the Foundation's Single Mother Student Success Initiative, which Miguel mentioned, and we have a very intentional goal of increasing the percentage of single student mothers who attain an associate degree within 6 years of applying to enrolling in a community college. So I'm grateful to hear from our panel, and I will invite them in now, if we can, we have Tara Daniels, as you can see on the screen, and Maya, who come to us from CSU Long Beach and Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. It's difficult for me to see that you are both on.
Yes, I am on.
Hi, Maya.
Hi everyone. My name is Maya. I am a first year graduate student at Cal Poly SLO, and I use she, her pronouns.
Hi, my name is Tara Daniels. I am a senior at Cal State Long Beach. I'm a sociology and psychology major, and I use she, her pronouns.
I am really excited to dig into this. I know that Tara and I both got a chance to talk a little bit prior to this, and Maya and I have gone back and forth in email. But Tara, specifically, and for those of you who are with us today, we are breaking this into 3 panels, 2 of which are going to be kind of like, what are the challenges around this intersectionality and all of these barriers that's like hinder a student parent to be successful? Because as we know, if a parent is away from their child, it's for a reason, right? Like we're committed, we're dedicated to going to school. We just need support, as earlier Theresa said. And then the third will be committed to talking about solutions. So with that, Tara, we're going to talk about some opportunities to make campuses more family friendly. But could you talk a little bit about some of the challenges around guilt and stigma as a parenting student? The disconnect of doing this for your son, but the strain it puts on being a parent and a student, but a parent first.
Absolutely. I'm a single mom with shared custody of my son. So anytime that I'm going to school, I have to separate my time with him. And with my time, it's already limited as it stands. So taking more away from school or for school has become impactful into his life. Sometimes our classes at the campus aren't cohesive for parenting students. Like my custody arrangement is Monday, Tuesdays, whereas classes tend to be Monday, Wednesday, and which causes me to have to give up my time with my son. We also have to deal with just the everyday like helping our kids with homework. What do we do? Do we do our homework? Do we help them with theirs? Our chores at home, keeping it a clean house. Sometimes those things fall to the wayside. So in regards to guilt, we have this guilt that are we doing enough for our child while we're trying to do better for ourselves? With that also in our background or in the back of our head stating or thinking, we're doing this for our children. So of course we're going to have this guilt. I'll throw myself out there. My house is not the cleanest right now. I used to be a very organized, clean, everything had a place. As it stands right now, I have to pick and choose. Do I feed my kid a healthy meal, or do I go to work and go to school and pick him up and go and do the fun things?
Tara, I remember reading a quote that said something along the lines of, before I had children, my house was clean and my wallet was full, but my heart wasn't as full. And it's so true. You're doing amazing. And it's true. These things are true. We have to juggle. It is like a constant juggle in which, what do we prioritize? We can't be 100% a student, 100% a parent at the same time, or 100% our own individual person. But there are ways in which a campus could support those barriers or those challenges in different ways. Now, a little bit of a shift, but Maya, you and I have talked a lot, and I really wanted to make sure that you were able to uplift the things that you felt were important for you as an individual, as a parent, student, and what's missing from this ongoing, discourse in higher ed about inequity, specifically for students of color. I mean, more narrowly, student parents of color. What are some things for people in this room to consider about intentionally supporting the intersectionality of race, parenting status?
Yes, thank you so much, Amber, for such a thoughtful question. As I mentioned before, I am a first-year graduate student at Cal Poly SLO, but more importantly, I'm the mother of a 20-month-old daughter. I began my educational journey at Santa Monica College. So I'm originally from Los Angeles, transferred to UC Irvine, and then now I'm here. So I like to think, because in my experience, I have acquired like a very unique perspective on the California Community College system, the UC system, and the CSU system. So like I can see what has been done well and what has not been done so well. But speaking to your question, I think my experience as a Black woman coming to the Central Coast has been really challenging as far as looking for housing, finding housing. Being a student parent, most of the housing accommodations here are geared towards more traditional students. So instead of apartments, there are rooms available. Instead of apartments available, there are or rooms, there are beds available. And that's just not practical or sustainable as a mother or someone with a family. I can't share a space with 3 other people. It's just not practical, especially with a toddler. And then just like looking for housing, because I couldn't find housing in SLO, I reached out to people in my cohort and my faculty advisor, and they suggested, I look into like Arroyo Grande in North County. And then, after doing my research, I discovered that there were 2 cross burnings in AG. And as a Black woman, that's just not, I can't live there, with my daughter, and I couldn't in full confidence say that I could protect her if something were to happen, especially if my partner wasn't around. So just hearing stories from, anecdotes and stories and reading things online from different people, that eliminated just a swath of housing options, available housing options for my partner and I, or my family. And then I ended up looking at Pismo. So I said, okay, Pismo, it's 15 to 20 minutes south of SLO. I found a beautiful apartment, somewhat affordable, right off the 101. And, went back and forth with the landlord and set up a time to view the apartment, to view the unit. And, she was very initially responsive and warm when we were corresponding online and, via text. But it just felt like as soon as we got there to view the unit, her whole demeanor changed. And, she became cold, hurt, abrasive, and just ended up finding out, she ended up telling my partner and I, we ended up moving forward after we viewed the unit. She said we ended up moving forward with another applicant. And, we came from Los Angeles. So it's if you knew that, or if that's what was the case, you could have told me that before making the trek from Los Angeles to Pismo. But I don't think it was that. I think it was an instance of racial discrimination. Of course, I don't know for sure, but that's what it felt like. And it's you didn't see me on paper, you didn't check my references or anything like that. And so we ended up finding an apartment in South County, but super expensive. And just comparing the cost of on-campus and on-campus housing, which is about a 2-bedroom is about $12,000, even though it's not offered to families. That is so much more sustainable and affordable than what we're paying now, and substantially cheaper than what we're paying now. So it's just going back to, and Dr. Anderson, I believe, touched on this somewhat, just the research consistently shows that Black women, African-American women are the most likely to incur student loan debt. And I believe the institution could eliminate that or alleviate that by offering on-campus family housing, because I had to take out additional loans to supplement, to cover the cost of cover housing costs. And so, just to kind of answer your question, it's layered, but I do think that people should consider how accessible and affordable on-campus family housing is, again, compared to off-campus family housing. And then also, I think of the financial component, which is how the lack of family housing may perpetuate the racial wealth divide and further limit socioeconomic mobility due to student loan debt. And then just lastly, I think providing housing for student parents is important because not only is a basic need being satiated, but also it's a conversation about equality. And that's something that the CSU system and every higher education institution should strive for. They should seek to provide the same resources for all groups of individuals. So like considering student parents are our students too, we deserve housing accommodations as well. So, yeah.
Well, and if I can interject, as a student, parent, and a mom, I struggle with housing as well, especially in the LA area. And I was fortunate enough that I do have a family friend who is giving me a deal on rent. However, what happens to all the other students who don't have that opportunity? Cal State Long Beach does not provide any housing for student parents. And so all these student parents are kind of trying to figure it out. And the how much housing is out here, it's unsustainable. It really is for someone who's trying to go to school, trying to be a mom, trying to be, trying to work. It's almost unsustainable. So I absolutely agree with you. I live 15, 20 minutes away from school as it is, just so that I could have some sort of affordable housing.
That would be an interesting topic, or like a study to conduct, in which where are student parents actually living around their campuses, or how are they living? I just want to take a moment to just absorb what the both of you shared, and your vulnerability and in your bravery, because I think that it's really important to acknowledge that you are the success story, and it might not feel like you're in success right now, but you are. Maya, you moved like a very far away to pursue your education, which is like a very brave thing to do from the start. And you did that without really like housing and all of these things. And you're an advocate for yourself and for your daughter. And I think that, Tara, like in the same way, whether it be close to where you are from or not, it's really admirable. And I relate, right? So I live in Los Angeles. It's expensive here. I firmly believe, and we talked about this in our discussion, that education is the greatest disruptor of poverty. I lived for 4 years in a bedroom with my children because that was the toll or the price that I paid for like a better life. And I have a better life, and they have a better life. And our conversations about, breaking that cycle are, what are you going to do when you go to college, not if you're going to go to college. And so I just offer that as insight to the future of like what you are all working for. And I am so in awe as you are like working through it. And I know that there's differences between ages of children. Maya, you mentioned your daughter is 20 months. Tara, you mentioned in our call, I believe your son is 10.
Yes.
So what are some accommodations to be thinking about for your child, not only for you, right? Like housing is like a staple, it's a basic need, which is a fundamental thing that colleges are now thinking about. So it's an opportunity to put student parents in that lens. But what could we think about in terms of children as well?
So in regards to the children aspect, if we did have some sort of family housing, like group family housing, you get a community. And that's something that the schools should think about, is that, just like students in the dorms, you gain a community and you gain your people, your tribe, to help you with getting your goals. I might have a class on Wednesdays, but who's going to watch my son? And that's something that we've been discussing. Is most schools here at Cal State Long Beach, we have childcare from birth until 3rd grade. My son's out of that. Who watches my kid? And I'm by myself out here, so I have had to struggle to either leave him with people that I don't necessarily trust, or pay for childcare that I can't afford.
Yeah,
So,
and
Yeah.
Sorry,
Go
Tara.
ahead.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I want to echo your sentiment. I think that, for me, childcare, one, having on-campus family housing would provide somewhat of a community, or would provide a community, and would give us some like normalcy, even though we are non-traditional students in some way, but it would provide some of that. But I think also like class, like scheduling and stuff like that. As a grad student, my classes are in the evening. So although childcare is helpful while working, my classes are at 4 o'clock, and the center closes 4 to 7 or 4 to 8, and the center closes at 5 o'clock. So it's like when I really need care, it's not there. And I know that, it's things are limited and stuff like that, but it's just like when I really need care, I don't have it. And again, my partner and I are alone here on the Central Coast. So it's just, again, speaking to your challenge, Tara, about trying to find care. Like, who do I trust? Like, am I gonna, have to, like, how much I might have to pay for this and stuff like that. It has been, very much so a challenge.
And I imagine there's a lot of stigma around these challenges as well, like asking for this help or thinking about this. And we are going to dive a little bit into our second mini panel session. And so I just want to thank you both for your insight and your recommendations. And I hope that everyone here who is watching, listening, really takes that to heart. And I will see the two of you back at the third session. Thank you.
Thank you.
And do we have our panel? We have Priscilla. Thank you so much, Miguel, for flagging this. And Bianca, Chade, and Alfonso. I'm really excited to dig into some of the deep, various topics that we maybe touched on and more. So welcome. Building on the kind of conversation that we just had, I would like to start with Alfonso, that I know you have a child also in an age bracket that's not, this K through third grade. I too have that. I have a 13-year-old, but just the needs of a student parent differ from the needs of a student right out of high school or a veteran, or the needs of a student parent with a teenager varies from that of a toddler. And so childcare resources need to look different. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience and challenges surrounding this topic specifically?
Hello, everyone. Sure. Yes, my name is Alfonso Morelos, and I am a student at CSUMB. So I'm gonna go ahead and begin to introduce myself. A little brief intro. I'm a parent of 4 kids, ages 16, 15, 12, 13, and 9. In 2012, 13, I became a single parent to my 2 boys. They were about 8 and 7. When they were coming home, I knew that I needed some education. I didn't have a high school diploma. So in 2015, I would enroll into Salinas Adult School. 2 years later, obtained my high school diploma. I was encouraged to pursue a higher education. I would transfer to Hartnell Community College, where I obtained a AA in sociology with the transfer, and now I'm at CSUMB. Back then, I did have help, but with rent so high, I needed to find 2 jobs, not only one. So I had to work 2 jobs to pay my rent. And my first semester was okay with my classes and me picking up my kids after school. But this last semester was a struggle. Why? Just because, the struggle was we don't live on campus, we live off campus, and we live about 25 miles, like no, about 16 miles away from campus. I would, we would wake up at 6 a.m. I would drive my kids to school 7:30, then I would go to work, and then I'll be getting off of work at 5:30, getting ready, and to drive to school, not knowing where my kids would be. And I would have to be in class by 5:30. I would get there about 5-7 minutes late, and I would be in class. But the whole time I would be in class, I'll be thinking about my kids. Like, where are my kids? Like, yes, I could text them. Yes, I could give them money. Yes, they're out of school. But yet they've been out of home since 6 a.m. And at this time they're tired. I drink coffee. I might drink a bang here, a bang or two, but their energy at this time, it's like they're crashed. And so I'm in class, and I at what 7 o'clock we get a break. Then I would get out, I would call them. By the time I would call them, they'll be asleep in their friend's sofa. They'll be like, "Oh, we're tired. We'll wait for you here," and that would happen once a week. But the other 2-3 days out of the week I would be getting off from class at 9:50, 9:50 p.m. So imagine that. Well, I mean, I'm an adult. I can manage me being out and going to school. I mean, going to work, going to school, and then picking them up. And I mean, that was a route, the daily route I would take. But getting off of school 9:50, get in my car. By the time I would pick them up at a friend's house, it would be like 10:05. I mean, they were already crashed. I mean, they were sleeping in their friend's sofa. I would ask them about their homework. They'd be like, "Don't talk to us about homework. We're tired. We're just gonna go to sleep." We would get home and do it all over again the next day. So I mean, at times there weren't the times that were missed. I mean, there was opportunities where I could help with homework, but it was too late for them. And the things that I struggle is, I mean, being in class, just thinking about my kids at 16, 15 years old. What were they doing? What is it like for them to be out just, I mean, hanging out at a friend's house? I know they were in a safe home, but yet, I mean, still not getting that support from their father. Mother lives about 40 miles away, and she wasn't able to provide that for them. But I mean, I struggled. I struggled to know that, not to know, but I mean, to understand that, I mean, if I would, I mean, persevere through this fall semester, that everything was gonna, I mean, everything will be great for our family. But I mean, it was tough. It was tough. It was tough to see that. It was tough to know that. It was tough to know that I wasn't there to help with homework. Now I'm here, and I have my 16-year-old attending summer school, and that's kind of like the guilt of him being in summer school. I wish he could just enjoy summer, but I mean, that kind of falls back on me too, because there was a few assignments where it was either my assignment or his assignment, and in the times that I had to turn in my assignment, the clock was ticking. Nobody was going to give me some extra time, and while I was working on my assignment, I was trying to help him, but he was already asleep. So
it's really thought-provoking what you're speaking on, specifically for those folks who maybe focus on 0 to 5, for instance. There's all this buzz around 0 to 5, and those are critical years. Like those are years in which like they're really intensive, time-consuming, time poverty experiences. But 16-year-olds like need constructive like structure. And it's this weird dynamic of knowing that you're doing this to better the life for them, and knowing that they're looking to you. And I hope you know this, that they're looking to you with pride, and you're setting an example of what they can also do and achieve. You're breaking, some of those barriers down. But that still doesn't change the fact that like in the here and now, you're not able to be in 3 places at once.
Right.
And could institutions possibly create programming or spaces in which maybe you could have a shared experience together while you're doing your homework? Because everything that you mentioned about your, time poverty was related to your children, not even touching on the fact that I'm sure you also had homework to do and or group projects to do and or, X, Y, and Z. Which really leads me now to Bianca. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. And we'll talk again for sure. But we've touched on some of these intersectionalities of identity, housing, childcare, specifically beyond 0 to 5, and housing. So Bianca, could you share, to the extent of your experience, what some of the basic needs, time poverty, and the role that colleges play in supporting food insecurity or other essential needs that affect parenting students? Because you have a unique experience for yourself.
Thank you, Amber. Hi, everybody. My name is Bianca Estrada. I'm a first-generation college student, and I'm currently pursuing my master's at CSUMB, California, or Cal State Monterey Bay. As a parenting student, I have experienced firsthand the challenges and barriers that come with being a parent and a student. Every decision I make every day surrounding my education, my employment, or housing situation, I always base it on what is going to benefit my child. It doesn't often come easy, but it's always on my mind. And, right now, currently, I'm experiencing a lot of the housing, right? And I think that's a big one right now after COVID and everybody, struggling with finding jobs and getting a job and things like that. It has been very challenging to figure out, should I work full-time? Should I be full-time student? Should I do both? And, missing that time with my child. I've made it a priority to let him know, when mom goes to work, we can have a better house, a better future, better, I tell him his toys, that gets him every time. And, then I tell him, okay, now I have to go to school, and letting him know that, because school is going to help me get a better job to provide all these things that we need in our life. I have a pretty smart boy, so I'm not saying it comes easy to share these things with him, because it deep inside, it does make me feel like I'm missing a lot. And even though I can't tell what he's feeling, often I know that it's not easy to not have mom home all the time. And I've tried to make it a thing where we do homework together, and homework's not his biggest thing. But having to balance the demands that come with being a student and a parent while meeting my family's basic needs, it's a big challenge that I have to face every day. Luckily, I do have my partner. It's also hard, having both parents out of the house, and all these things that come with that. But there are also contributing factors to these financial demands, and it does put this weight on again having to choose between working and going to school. I don't know if that answered the question, but I'm a little bit nervous.
You're amazing. You have nothing to be nervous about. How old is your son?
He's 5. He's 5. Yeah, he's very smart.
I love every one of you. So I'm not just speaking to Bianca here. I love the way that you light up when you speak about your children. I ask you a question and you first lead with, these are my children. This is who I am as a parent first. And I think that's important to think about when we have this title. We've gone around in the field about is it student parents? Is it parenting students? Is it students with children? And really, it doesn't matter. You're parent first, essentially. And if there's a choice that has to be made, in which is it your child's needs versus your education, you're going to choose your child. And you are also brilliant. You all have this like amazing drive. And I think it's really important to highlight that when we think about the GPAs of student parents being twice that of their non-parenting peers, yet why is it taking student parents twice as long to graduate or attain a certificate or degree? Like, you don't need a handout, you need a hand up. You're there, you're committed, and it just takes a little bit of support. And Chade, when you were talking with me last week, which I wanted to be mindful of not sharing too much because I didn't want this to feel regurgitated. I want it to feel like raw and real. But it really struck me that you had a lot of family housing needs that we often don't think about. You know, the guidelines, the rules, the barriers to maintain housing, even if you get it, and the additional needs and considerations that are surrounding parenting students specifically. And I would just love for you to talk a little bit about that. And maybe you have thoughts about what Maya was speaking to as well as a mother of a student of color as well.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Chade Johnson. I am a wife, first generation, system impacted, and I am a mother of two, Jalen and Harmony, 5 years old and 2. And yeah, I definitely, when I was speaking with Amber, I had discussed like, I actually was able to live in housing that was provided by the university that I attended. But I thought, oh man, you know, I'm moving from far away. My family is, you know, in the Central Valley. I'm going up north. It's going to be, as long as we have housing, everything will be secure. And just what came with that was just so unexpected. So you can have housing, and we did get affordability, but then the little nuances that you need being a family, like laundry is a big deal for a family of 4. And I'm not saying that we have to have an in-unit washer and dryer. It would be great, but there wasn't enough washers and dryers for as many people as living there. So you try going to the wash house and you're like, I just can't wash. I never can wash, you know, and that's just piling up. And my husband will have to stay up to like 2 in the morning washing because this is the only time he can do it. This is the only time it's empty. They're either broke or it's a bug infestation, all of these things that you're going through. And it was just tough. Like, even my husband has asthma. So we moved down here, we moved up north so the air should be better than the Central Valley. And he had 2 bad panic attack, like asthma attacks. So the ambulance had to come during the school year. And it was like, oh, well, you must have mold in your walls. And we would go talk to the housing people, and they're like, well, no, if there's mold, then you have to clean it. I'm like, no, there's no visible mold. He's just having an asthma attack. So we had to buy AC units and air purifiers. And this is all like, okay, it's affordability. But then there's these other things that I have to figure out how to purchase. Like AC units are like $300, the portable ones up to $600. And just to have it to where it's like, it was to the point where you couldn't even be in your apartment during the summer because it was so hot. And I brought a newborn baby into that situation. And during that time that I was pregnant, I was like, okay, I don't know how this birth is going to go. Up in the Sacramento area was nothing but like Black maternal death, like billboard signs, all type of stuff. And I was just like, okay, I don't know how this birth is going to go. I could have an easy birth. I could have a cesarean. I just know that I can't return after 1 week of pushing out a baby. That's where it was going to land on. My baby would land on spring break. So I was talking to housing. They were like, well, you can't live here unless you're full time. But I'm like, I'm going to have a baby soon, so I can't be full time because that would be me saying I could commit to 12 units and then fail a class. And that's basically what they were advising me. Like, you should just fail it and then just retake it. But I'm like, no, I'm trying to graduate. So I had to petition all this stuff that I'm doing while pregnant to just stay there. And eventually they let me, but they're like, you have to return to full time when fall comes. And it's like, I was going to do that regardless. So all of this was unnecessary, like, you know, and so, yeah, and even during our last year there, right before I graduated, there was a fire in the apartment and somebody ended up dying. And it was right across from my son's room. So he's like looking at the fire and he's like, whoa, what happened? You know, and it's like all of these things they didn't think about until that happened. Now we have firefighters coming to train us. Now we have medics coming. Oh, let's give the kids hats and stuff. But before that happened, there was not a presence of the chancellor or the firefighters anywhere trying to do community things with us. So that was a drawback. So yes, housing, affordability, proximity, that was all great. But the wealth of the health and wealth of the kids matter. I want my kids to breathe good air. I want them to be comfortable in the summer. And I want the university to take that on. If you admit a student parent, and I stand by this all the time, if you admit a student parent, then you're saying, I'm going to support that student parent. Don't admit me to a situation that's going to force me to drop out. Then I'd rather not even get accepted.
I feel like I'm screaming on the inside and also wanting to cry and like clap and applause, because everything you just said is extremely on point, and also fixable. These are issues in which like there can be solutions for. And you know, what struck me in our conversation that you had said was, beyond what you just shared, which were like really tragic sidebars to the housing situation, was also the stress and anxiety of having to maintain like full time and get good grades. And if that doesn't happen, or if you slip, that your housing situation for your family is taken at a moment's notice. And that's not okay either, right? Like that's not being equitable or thoughtful when we're talking about student parent housing.
Yeah, it's something that it's a great system in place, and like everything, it just needs improvement. No student parent wants to sit here and sacrifice everything to fail a class. That's when you start bringing in, okay, what's going on with your basic needs? Let's get some counselors that are already housed here that can help you. Like maybe you just lost somebody in your family, and maybe that's why your grades don't reflect it. And the last thing you need is for somebody to tell you, hey, you're going to get evicted because you got an F in this class, your GPA is lower. Like I have a whole, and you know, your kids won't get that. They're like, I have my room set up. I have my everything set up. We moved down here and you're just ready to kick us out. And not to mention, it's like you're a family housing place. So all of this stress on somebody who's pregnant, who's already facing Black maternal death, like all of these things that could happen, it was just inconsiderate. And that was a tough pregnancy with school alone, not anything else going on.
Sure. And like Theresa mentioned in that survey that I believe it was number 2, that the students reported like that a service that they would like is staff training and sensitivity to parenting students. And I'm just thinking about like Title IX, you know, what were those implications in place to allow some grace for a lower case, you know, a unit load for that specific period of time in which you were going to deliver your child. And you know, we talked about this in our call, relate very intimately in that my daughter also came the day before spring break. My water broke in my 8 a.m. math class, and I didn't know about Title IX. And I came back to school, she was 13 days old, and I was carrying around a cooler and I was pumping in a bathroom before I learned about, you know, an on-campus family resource center, which should be standard across the, you know, community college system, but unfortunately isn't, but an opportunity, which we'll talk about later. But I'm going to pivot here, and I really would like to hear from Emily. Many of you have mentioned your partners, and you've mentioned your, you know, you say, thankfully, I have these partners. And, you know, Emily, I know that you went in, this is something is a struggle, and it's important to talk about that you went through a divorce, and that your needs as a single mother are very different, maybe, than those of on the call who have a partner. You know, and your time poverty, like Autumn Green, actually, and I believe she's on this call, said this to me once about being a PCP student, like parking lot, class, parking lot. We don't have time to engage in campus culture as parents. We don't have time for tutoring when we have our children with us. And, you know, can you just talk a little bit about like the toll that takes on like mental, physical health, and the barriers around anxiety and divorce and going to school to what you feel most comfortable with? I also don't want you to be uncomfortable.
I'm just so nervous. It's not about sharing. It's just about talking in general. But yeah, so I chose to go to school like the day I left my husband. I signed up for classes. And so I started that next semester. And I was married, so I had to go through a divorce. And like my very first day of classes, I had to miss because I was supposed to be in court. And I had to email all these professors like, I know this is an impacted class and there's a wait list that's full, but please don't give my spot. Like I'll be there the next class, you know? And so that was something that was kind of a barrier in the very like right away. And then as the semester went on, and then multiple semesters, it was hard because I was having to do counseling from anxiety and honestly just trauma from my marriage that was not healthy. And then counseling for my children through the process. And so I had to do all of these things, but I was the only person who could take them or pick them up from daycare or take them to appointments. So I had to try and schedule classes, work, doctor's appointments for me, appointments for the kids, court, everything all into the childcare hours because I didn't have any other help outside of daycare. And so that was something that, like, signing up for classes, there would be 5 classes, like for instance, a physiology class one semester. There were 5 open slots. 3 of them were 8 a.m. One of them was, I think, like 7 p.m. And then there was one that I could have made it to, but by the time my registration time slot, it was already completely full. The wait list was completely full. So I had to wait. It took me 3 semesters to get in to that science class before my priority registration was, my time slot for registration was enough of a priority to get in. So things like that, that they never talk about or explain to us beforehand. And then aside from that, you know, someone I think mentioned, you know, get a babysitter of someone that you might not trust that much, but you can pay them. Well, my son was having severe behavioral issues, and even trained professionals at school and daycare, it was a struggle to count that as, what's the word I'm looking for? Reliable daycare, because sometimes something would happen and I'd have to leave and go get him. And, you know, it's sad, but he was struggling, and it wasn't just me that was struggling, it was him too. And so that was something that I couldn't just hire a babysitter, even if I found the money or found the person willing. Like for my daughter, I could have done that. She didn't really struggle the same way my son did, but I couldn't trust that a babysitter was equipped to handle the behavioral things that he had going on.
I probably can speak for every person on this call to say how much in awe I am in all of you. And for you, Emily, specifically, to be embarking on a better life for you and your children in a time when like your life was falling apart is extremely, extremely brave and like a really big thing to do. And I hope you're really proud of yourself. I know you're still in the journey, but take the small moments to acknowledge where you were and where you are now. I mentioned, you know, and this is like the perfect segue to like invite everybody back in a second to talk about some of like, what are the solutions in AB 2881 and with priority registration. Some of these like really like minute details that we don't often think about when we're thinking about some of the barriers that impact student parents' overall success, retention, graduation, transfers, like attainment rates. Why is it that student athletes have priority registration? Because they need to be able to like align their classes to their, you know, workout schedules. And don't get me wrong, I actually play flag football. I love to do that. So I love athletes, but student parents are juggling a child schedule, their own work schedule, their school schedule. And if you can't get into a class for 3 semesters, how much, I mean, that one class, if we're thinking about the amount of time it takes for an associate's degree, what, I mean, that's a reason, right? So why are we not looking at student parents as an equity issue when we're thinking about policy measures? So I would love for everybody to come back on. I have like a couple guiding questions and I want everybody to jump in and thinking about some solutions and or recommendations in the field for here are the challenges, what can we do about it? So again, I'm having a hard time seeing if everyone's back. Okay, I am seeing now. So sure, so do we dive in? So we all have our guiding questions, but I guess I'll just jump right into that. Is what would a family-friendly campus look like?
So for me, I work at the WGEC, the Women's Gender Equity Center at Cal State Long Beach, and I work as one of the pregnant and parenting student assistants. And I do feel like we have a great campus for student parents. We have a pregnant and parenting programs, student groups, student support through our beach parent programming for mental health. We have pumping stations with a breast milk fridge. We have family restrooms. We have a CalWorks liaison on campus, which is something that not every campus has. Someone to advocate for our CalWorks students. A CalFresh Center on campus where students can actually apply for CalFresh benefits, which is SNAP benefits. We have the family-friendly study center that will be back next semester. COVID kind of made us take a break on it, but we're coming back. And one thing that I've been advocating at our campus is tutoring for students that are fourth on up, so that we actually have student tutors for those children so that student parents can study. And this is located in our library. These are things that help us as student parents. However, there are things, housing is one. There are many things that we can use on campus. Additional and extensions on scholarships, on our Pell Grants. I'm at the end of my Pell Grant because it's taken me so long to complete school. I'm waiting for my financial aid to go through for next semester so I can finish my last 2 classes for undergrad. And then there's other things, advocacy training and campus training for our professors so that they can understand the needs of students. COVID did help us and help professors to understand what us as student parents have to go through when they were having to work from home. They realized the lack of care that we have to deal with. But it's still not at a point where we have allies on campus. Our professors are our allies. We should have that. We should be able to approach them and say, hey, I'm having a struggle. My son has a project due on this date. I have this project due on this date at 12 p.m. or 12 o'clock. Yeah, 12 p.m., 12 a.m. Can I get an extension without having to be docked points? And this is just training, staff training. We need resources for more resources for our older elementary students and middle school students. We're not trying to create latchkey kids. And right now in our society today, we can't have that. So we need a safe environment for our children to be able to participate while we're trying to better our lives. And then lastly, and this is something that I thought of recently, more flexible work study options for students like me. I'm a work study student, but I can only work until 5 p.m. What about students who we've proved through COVID that we can work from home, allowing us to do work from home options for work study students?
So who wants to follow that?
I was like, I don't know if I want to follow that.
I do want to add something to that. Hi, everyone. My name is Priscilla. I would add that, at a master's level, 2 things. We don't qualify for work study and we don't get financial aid. That's tough. I just graduated with my BA and I got accepted into a master's program. And I was currently working as a work study student under my undergrad, but once I graduated, I knew that ended and I knew that I was going to have to look for part-time work. And at a master's level, and you're required to do an internship of 16 hours a week. Typically, they're unpaid. So what they're asking me to do is find a regular job, which is that will where it's 20 hours, because at this point, I don't think I can manage working more than 20 hours a week while going to school full time. And now they're asking me to add an unpaid internship to this, and that is tough. So if there was a way to continue work study into a master's program, some sort of financial aid, that would also be great. And then also like more paid internship opportunities. They're asking too much of us to have work, school full time, and do an internship. That is just, for student parents, that's almost unmanageable. And I could see why some student parents would not want to pursue a graduate program, because that is tough on us, and we have to make a lot of sacrifices to make that happen.
Thank you, Priscilla, actually, for raising that, because it's a conversation we have in philanthropy too, about access and how there's these pipelines of like, right, so high school to community college, if that is the path, and or from community college to university. But how does that differ when you go from like a bachelor's program to a master's? I know for myself that there was so much less support going from a community college to university, and then continuing. And why is that, right? Like your workload increases, your demands increase, and there seems to be less support financially and supportive services. And so that's really important to raise, because we're talking about really like uplifting families, and degree attainment that is important. And so we don't want to stop at an associate's degree. So why are we stopping the support there? And I think that's a really important point to raise. I think, Emily, you had wanted to add on about just like, what does a family-friendly campus look like? And in the chat box, I'm also just seeing, the validation of support for children as well. We're whole people. And when we're supported in that way, it just feels different, right? Like Alfonso, if you were able to bring your children with you on campus and you could go to the library and study together, what a opportunity to expose your children to higher education, to share this experience with them, and to get support for both you as a student, so you're able to succeed in your courses, and byproduct your children, So any more thoughts or ideas around that?
Yes, maybe ideas of having maybe teen centers, or having teen centers, or a homework study room where I can bring my teens onto campus, or even sports, getting them involved in sports, gym, any of those activities would be helpful. Also, priority registration. My fall classes were late evenings just because I couldn't get into the morning classes. My time for priority registration was at 12 p.m. when other students would get at 6 a.m. So that would really, really help.
Thank you. And Emily, I saw your hand was raised.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say, this is just I have never asked anyone if it's even possible, but to have a position on campuses where this person is like an academic counselor for parents, though. So instead of, the psychology department has their academic counselors, then, this department has this, or basic needs has resources for parents that you can go and find yourself through their links. But someone that you could reach out to, email them, ask them for help on certain things when, like, for instance, a professor is just absolutely not accommodating for specific to parent needs. And if it's okay, I could give an example of this semester versus a different semester where I had things come up with my children. Early on in my academic career, I had kept an A the entire semester, and then my son got sent home from school the day before our finals because he was sick. And so I didn't show up for finals, and my professor asked me why. And I told her he's sick. There's nothing I could do about it. And she said, I'll bring the final to your house. Like, I will give it to you in your living room. And I'm like, what? I didn't even know you could ask a professor to be accommodating. She said, it's against policy, but I can't have you. I've seen how hard you've worked. You've kept an A all semester, and you're going to get barely a C in the class if you don't take this final. So she came and gave me my final in the living room. And that was something that was just a huge blessing. Then fast forward years, and now this semester, I had finals, and I had allotted a lot of time for my final research paper for this course. And it took way longer. It took 18 hours, and I had other finals that I was working on. And my kids had play and a couple things that took a lot of time in my last week. So I turned in my final that I had spent 18 hours working on to the professor by the due date, and sent an email at the same time saying, life has been crazy this week. I didn't anticipate taking this long. Can I have like another 24 hours to revise it and finish, make it better? Because I already know what I'm turning in and it's not a great grade. And she responded with, if you don't have a doctor's note, I can't help you. And I was like, I'm not trying, like, I even explained that I wasn't trying to get like you said, the handout versus a hand up. I was just explaining my situation. My kids, I couldn't not take them to their play and their choir concert they'd worked hard to be involved in. So that was something that was really, really difficult. And if there had been someone that I could email and say, this is what happened, this is the situation, can I maybe get some help? Do you know of a way that I could petition this to change? Or, you know, but instead I got a 61 on my final. And so that was hard. It was really hard. I spent 18 hours. I've never spent that much time on something. And then I got such a terrible grade. And I don't know if I deserved a 61 or if I pissed her off by asking for more time. I don't know, but it would have been nice to have someone I could have communicated that with.
Which is the importance of policy, right? Because you just had two very different experiences based on two different experiences that don't have structure around it. So, you know, there's this Title IX that we often talk about, but when I mean, how many of you knew about Title IX, you know, supports? Where is it located on your campus, you know, website? Where are there resources for you as parents to think about your rights and your accommodations and your support? And I believe Generation Hope, an organization, has a disclosure on their website for professors to put on their syllabi. Like, should every professor be a social worker? Like, no. But should they have somebody to point you in the direction of somebody who can support you? Yes. Right? If they care about your overall success as a student, then that means that they have to think about your life outside of being a student that impacts your ability to be a student. And so that is the reality of student parents. And I thank you for uplifting that, Emily. And we have 5 more minutes to just still have this conversation about possible solutions, which some of the family-friendly study lounges and or tutoring ideas that were raised up are ideas. And I want to just say, I do want to share, I'm in a role at Ecmc Foundation now, which is really exciting to me to be able to like learn from the field of all the different work being done around student parents, as well as like have just that different perspective. But for 10 years, I was in a program that supported student parents. And one of the things we created were some of these things you're talking about. And we had tutoring for children, and we had a family-friendly study lounge where students could bring kids and go into a kind of separate lab. And this was at Los Angeles Valley College. And these things need to be systematically prioritized. Student parents need to be designated as an equity group. And I think we're all thinking that. And I think AB 2881 from Senator Berman is one of those things that is creating priority registration as a bill and as a priority, and also data collection so we can know how many of us are out there. Like if there's 30% of us on campuses, why do we feel like we're like struggling on our own? You know, I'm looking at this screen right now and I'm seeing the beautiful hands. There's 3 of you that go to the same campus. Do you know each other? I hope you do now. But Bianca, I see that you have your hand raised, so I would love to just give it over to you for whatever your thoughts are.
Yeah, I wanted to answer your question, like what will make a campus a family friendly, back then in undergrad, I didn't have the best experience when I had my child. So I started creating my own support group, my own support system. So that's where Emily, Priscilla, and Alfonso, I have come across them, and they were all on the same campus. And, we put together this club that started back in 2018 that creates the sense of belonging on campus. We're kind of rebellious. We're out there on campus trying to like advocate for everything we need on campus. And we are there for each other. I hope that's how I feel. Like if there needs something, I'm there for them. We're all there for each other. We also have accomplished a lot through the club, and with a lot of staff and faculty support. CSUMB has come a long way, definitely, but there's always room for improvement. And one of them can be like, one thing that I'm continuing to work, and kind of right now it's being facilitated as the part of the club. It's like a parent wellness support group, which I'm hoping it becomes an official support group on campus, because it is important. I know they do provide a woman support group, but I feel like there should be one specific for parents, because there's different types of things that we go through. And also, when we meet other parents, we kind of exchange numbers, connect, we'll have play dates. I try to make it where like, okay, let's come together, let's work on homework, and our kids kind of like build that relationship. But it also shows them that they're not alone. They can be like, oh, your mom does homework too all the time, your mom's always at school. They kind of can relate in that sense. Right now, the proudest thing that our club and the campus has done is create the family-friendly study room, which we're also proud of. And it has definitely made a big impact on campus, because we're becoming like, we're showing that we are there, and we are here to stay, and we are here to like pursue education. And another thing that can help is like create more family-friendly events on campus. Because often I question, like, can I bring my child? Am I even able to go to this event? Is it okay that I show up with the kid? So that's another thing that a lot of campuses should like kind of think about, and make it more, so other traditional students can become accustomed that, oh, there are kids on campus as well. They're like, oh, it's weird. One of the things that I have come across and a traditional student has shared is like, when I see kids on campus now, it makes me feel at home. It's like a home away from home. It brings that family-centered environment. So yeah, those are my 2 cents.
Amber, I just wanted to add this too. It kind of echoes. I said this before in our call, where I feel like our kids are an extension of us. And if you admit me, the reason why we struggle in class is because there's no separation between me being a parent. No matter where I'm at, I'm always going to be a parent. So if you're going to affiliate and say, hey, I'm a bulldog, or I'm this, as far as Fresno State, then my kid is a baby bulldog as well. And I feel like you have to bring them in and incorporate that. So that means leverage. This universities have so much money. Leverage your students, leverage your money, and use it. Like, I want to give my son swim lessons. Why do I have to go pay for them when there's a swimming pool at the gym? Don't they have swimmers that could do that? Little stuff like that to alleviate and make the kid feel like, hey, I'm a bulldog along with my mom. So just that is a way to make it friendly. Make my kid feel like this is their home away from home as well.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And I hope everybody also is like feeling that exact same way. Parent first. And as I mentioned, education is the greatest disruptor of poverty. We talk about wanting enrollment, after COVID. How are we thinking about this next generation of students that are coming in? How are we engaging them? If you're thinking about ROI, if you're thinking about butts and seats, if you're thinking about funding, not that it should have to become that language to convince somebody to do the right thing, but even there, right? You are all incredibly motivated. Your GPAs are twice as those of your non-parenting peers, I'll say again. And the potential here is incredible. And I thank you all for your time and your expertise and your thoughts and your vulnerability. It's been a really amazing time talking with all of you. And I want to just take that time to say that. And thank you to the Michelson Foundation for hosting this and for thinking about being intentional about having a conversation about student parents and having this webinar series, but like not just having a tokenism of student parents who can come in and say like, here's my sob story or here's my success story, but to be really intentional about saying, how can we think about student parents with student parents? So thank you again. And Miguel, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you so much, Amber, and thank you to all the student parents who joined us today. I think there was like at least 20 mic drops after you all chimed in. We just really appreciate the opportunity you've given us to hear your lived experience and learn how to better support you all. When we first kicked off this series, we knew we wanted to center your voices in these conversations, and we're just super grateful that you've just graciously helped facilitate, this learning opportunity. Know that we'll continue to work alongside you, and that you and your families really are the North Star of our endeavors. So thank you. The State of Pregnant and Parenting Students in California is presented by the Michelson 20mm Foundation in service of advancing equity for all students and families. We want to thank our partners, Ascend at the Aspen Institute, Blue Shield of California Foundation, California Competes, the Education Trust West, and Tipping Point Community. Shout out to all of you for helping this series happen. Truly grateful for your partnership. We'll post a recording of today's discussion on our YouTube channel, the Michelson 20mm Foundation, by tomorrow. If you or your organization want to become part of our work focused on supporting pregnant and parenting students, please reach out to me personally at miguel@20mm.org. You can also stay engaged by signing up for our newsletter at 20mm.org to receive news and updates about our Pregnant and Parenting Student Project, as well as our other events and programs. Truly grateful for your presence today. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great rest of the day.